by with it. Madam President, as if in a legislative session, I asked unanimous consent that the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs be discharged from further consideration, and that the Senate now proceed to S Resolution 136. I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from Vermont.
Madam President, I find this resolution somewhat odd, if I may say so. There are enormous crises facing our country and the world. In fact, that we are spending time on the floor of the Senate to condemn a proposition or a theory does not seem to me to be the best way to be spending our time. And the implication, and I think the senator from Indiana made this implication, that the President of the United States is objecting to raising taxes, is simply not factual. The President has come forward with some very specific tax proposals, but his proposals are not meeting much support on the other side of the aisle, because he is saying that he doesn't want to raise taxes on anybody in this country earning less than $400,000 a year, but he does want to raise taxes on some of the wealthiest people in America and some of the largest corporations who today may be paying zero in federal income tax. And he shares a concern that many of us share, that Warren Buffett reminds us that the effective tax rate for the billionaire class is actually lower than it is for working families. And the President's view, which I share, is this Congress must address the enormous crises facing working families, and that is rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, making sure that our kids have quality child care and pre-K, that we have got to address the existential threat of climate change, and that we have to address many of the other problems facing working families. And one way we do that is demanding that the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes. You know, when we talk about resolutions condemning something, I'm not, again, sure why we're here condemning a particular theory. We might be today thinking about condemning the actions of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives today. They got rid of a member of their leadership for the crime of suggesting that that party should not maintain a big lie implying that Donald Trump won the election. Shall we condemn that? I think that's worth condemning. I think we might want to condemn the fact that we have more income and wealth inequality today in America than any time since the 1920s. Let's condemn that. Maybe we want to condemn the fact that every scientist who has studied the issue tells us that climate change is a threat to our nation and the world, and we have done virtually nothing to lead the world in addressing climate change. Let's condemn that inaction. Let's condemn the fact that in the richest country in the history of the world, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. How about condemning that? Let's condemn the fact, maybe, that half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Let's condemn the fact that we live in a country which has institutional racism. We can go on and on. There's a lot of things to condemn, but I don't know that it is in the best interest of the United States Senate to be condemning a particular economic theory. You don't like it? Argue against it. That's fine. But I don't know that we have to spend our time condemning it. So with that, Madam President, I object.
The objection is heard.
Madam President.
The senator from Indiana.
So, don't disagree with Senator Sanders said in terms of policy that needs to be debated. But a classic tactic when you're focusing on how you're going to pay for something is to change the subject. And whatever you think about what happened over in the House of Representatives, whatever you think about the other issues, this is about being honest with future generations. And where has that worked and been a good end result? When it comes to some of the taxation part of it, that's a smokescreen, because even if you raised all the revenue they're talking about with those taxes, and I'm a believer that corporations should pay their fair share. Multinationals that flatten their tax rate, that's different from many C Corps, many corporations. But the dishonesty in that argument is that you couldn't cover even 20% of our existing structural deficit. So you need to be honest. If you want to do this, ask your kids, ask your grandkids if they're willing to put that burden on them. And there's no theory out there other than this, which is being used as a current rationalization, that would make that ever have a pleasant outcome.
Madam President, if I can respond, I am
Senator from Vermont.
not sure. The senator from Indiana suggested a moment ago that the president was not interested in raising taxes, and of course he has a very specific proposal to raise taxes. And I would suggest to my colleague from Indiana that if we want to talk about the burden on our kids and our grandchildren as a result of the national debt, maybe we should also be discussing the fact that under the last administration, a massive tax break was given to the very wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations. We were told that that tax plan would pay for itself, but in fact it will result in almost $2 trillion in additional national debt. And virtually all of those benefits went to the people on top. So all that I'm saying, Madam President, is we can argue taxation, we can argue economic policy, we can argue why we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. We can argue why we are paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We can argue why we have a political system that allows billionaires to buy elections, a lot of things that we could be talking about. But I'm not sure that it is in the best interest of the Senate to be condemning a particular economic idea that some economists have brought up.
Madam President, I know we got a vote coming
Senator
up
from
and
Indiana.
won't belabor it. I think there's the basis for maybe a good conversation, because we're not going to solve it today. When it comes to the tax package that was put through in the Jobs Act and Tax Cut Act of 2017, and I would have some authority on this, Senator Sanders. I spent 37 years in the trenches running a small business that ended up being a larger company. 3 of my kids run it with a good young executive team, the American dream. And my observation was that we had kind of hit the sweet spot. And the CBO, who actually put that original cost of $1.5 trillion, $150 billion per year over 10 years, said that we were actually generating record revenues pre-COVID, and that they could have revised and still might that trajectory. I think that if we're going to go forward, you got to realize that there's a limit to anything you can do through government. And when you try to raise taxes, you got to be honest about it. Over 50 years, regardless of what the tax rate has been, the economy has generated about 17% of our GDP with tax revenues. Because when they're high, there's less economic activity. You actually find a sweet spot like we did with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, and the economy was proving it pre-COVID.